XV1. For critical review is Jordan Maxwell on the Great Metaphor. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.
My friend with me today, which I hope to have him with me quite often. I have two friends here with me. One you haven't seen and one you won't be seeing. He's our mystery co-host, but my other friend
radio
is Michael. Mike has been a dear friend for many years, but Mike and I have talked about these subjects together over the years, so that's why I thought it would be good to have Mike come in and help me, because Mike is very knowledgeable on a lot of the subjects I talk about, especially in relation to the cults and religions and the secret societies in the churches. And especially interesting to him, Mike's one of the subjects he was very interested in is the Mormon Church, what do they call them, Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, Latter-day.
Yeah, Latter-day Saints.
Sin today and be a saint tomorrow.
Yeah, right. And of course, Joseph Smith, who was the founder of the Mormon Church, what we call the Mormon Church today.
He's their first prophet.
Yeah, first prophet.
But what I'd like to get into is, let's talk about the Prince of Darkness, Lucifer. What is he all about? What is this? Who is he?
Well, look at Malachi Martin on Art Bell. Did a whole couple hours with Art Bell many years ago. And Dr. Malachi Martin was probably one of the highest-ranking Jesuit Catholic theologians in the world. An extremely important man in the Vatican, Malachi Martin. A wonderful man. I found him to be fascinating and very honest and decent man. But he talked about he was on, like I said, he was on Art Bell show, and they were talking about the Vatican and religion and God and all that kind of thing. And he made a statement. Father Malachi Martin made a statement that Art Bell did not catch and didn't follow up on. He said in the program, in answer to some question, he said, well, Lucifer is not the devil. Lucifer is not the devil. Satan, in the Christian scheme, Satan is the devil, not Lucifer. Lucifer is totally different. And then Art Bell went on with some other questions, and I thought, wait a minute, back up. That is a very important point he just brought out. If I had been the host, I would have said, wait a minute, explain that to me. Who is Lucifer then? If it's not the devil, and this is the highest-ranking Jesuit theologian in the world for the Vatican, and he's saying, Lucifer's not the devil. You better go back and do your homework. Satan may be the devil, but not Lucifer.
Now, we're using Satan as a loose term. That Satan is basically just the darkness.
Yeah, well, Satan, the very word Satan is a Hebrew term for a lawyer that opposes you in court. That's what it means in Hebrew.
Yes.
And the Hebrew, Satan is Satan. A Satan in Hebrew is a lawyer who opposes you in a court of law.
Devil's advocate.
The devil's advocate. Exactly. And so that's where the word Satan comes from in Hebrew for a lawyer who's opposing you. He is your opposer in law before the judge, before God. He's opposing you. So therefore you're in the light. You are like Jesus. You're bringing the truth to light. And the guy is opposing you before God, before the judge, is Satan, as Satan in Hebrew, which is your opposing lawyer. So keep that in mind.
How do we get from such a loose term as lawyer to devil?
Yeah.
Into the Christian New Testament.
Well, because Satan is the opposer, and of course, obviously you are holy and you are wonderful, and therefore your opposer is evil, obviously. Well, your opposer is evil. E-V-I-L.
Unless evil wins, and then...
Yeah, well, of course, but I would say you take the word evil, E-V-I-L, and put a D in front of it, it becomes devil. So that's why two lawyers going at it and back and forth in a courtroom, that's they're playing the devil, the devil's advocate. And so the other guy thinks he's right. Well, I'm the devil's advocate. I think you're wrong. And I think I'm right, and then he's the devil's advocate. I think you're wrong. And so, and the judge represents the planet Saturn because he's wearing a black robe, and Saturn was the god of retribution and karma, and he's the god of anything that's Saturnian. Saturnian, my friend here will explain that Saturn was the god of law. It was the establisher of law. So anything that's Saturnian that has to do with Saturn is the police department, the gangs, or mafia, or armies, police, as I said, courts, prisons. That's all Saturnian, because Saturn was also referred to as the inhibitor. He's the one who holds you back. He inhibits you.
So let's get back. Let's get on to it. When the judge is sitting on the bench, the bench is
bench in Latin. A bench is a bank, and the reason it goes back to the old ancient world and the ancient Middle East, and they still do it today. And in Egypt, when you're in Egypt and you're walking down the streets and with all the people selling things in the street, everybody's sitting on mattresses or pillows, and they have in front of them a long bench on which they have the things they're selling. And so if you stop, which I've done many times in Egypt, buy something, you have to lean down and you're putting the money down, and they're taking the money and giving you the product, but you're doing business on the bench because it's a bench. And so in Latin, bench means bank. So therefore, when we say the judge is ruling from the bench, the judge is ruling for money. He's ruling for the bank.
Basically just a referee.
Well, that's it. That's all he is a referee, and he's wearing a black robe. That's why when judges walk into a courtroom, everyone rises in the courtroom. Why? Because when a Catholic priest walks onto the altar, everyone in the church rises. It has to do with ancient Roman Saturnian law.
Jordan.
Yes.
In relation to the bank, those judges, they're a branch of the executive department. And if you look on the internet, you will see the president was assassinated. His agents were not the Secret Service, they were Treasury agents. That's who protects the president, is the agents of the Treasury, now known as Department of Homeland Security. And anyone's free to verify that on the internet. So,
explain that.
Well, you have a judge who's sitting on a bench, which means bank,
Mm-hmm.
and the president, his agents are agents of the Treasury Department. That has something to do with money in banks. And those judges are now, since we have, for all intents and purposes, administrative tribunals, they're a branch, they're an arm of the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
The executive branch, the president, is guarded by agents of the Treasury, now known as Department of Homeland Security, because you have to secure the federal debt with something. That's you and me. And then the judges are sitting on the bench. So everything you're saying, when you look at the facts and add it all up, that in point of fact is true in my mind.
This is why when you're born, on your birth certificate, on the lower left-hand side of a birth certificate, down at the corner, it will tell you that this birth certificate is the property of the Department of Commerce.
Precisely. And I've seen birth certificates from the Philippines that say Internal Revenue. And the Philippines at one time were a territory of the United States.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about all this, and getting back to this whole thing about judges and law and Satan. And as I said, Dr. Malachi Martin said that Lucifer is not the devil. Well, you know who Lucifer really is. The Bible tells you specifically who Lucifer is, and he's not the devil. Satan is the devil. And again, devil is simply the word evil with a D in front of it. Like God is the root word for God is the same word for good. So you take a O out of good and it becomes God. God is good,
God
the
is good,
devil is
yeah.
evil, right? But who is Lucifer? Well, the fact of the matter is the Bible says Lucifer is Jesus. Jesus is Lucifer. That's in the scriptures. That's in the book of Revelation. Go get the New Testament of the Bible, and in the book of Revelation, Revelation 22:16, Jesus says, and it's quoting Jesus, and he said, "I, Jesus, I am the bright morning star. I'm the offspring of David, and I am the bright morning star." So this is Jesus saying, "I am the bright morning star."
And that's verified in the Catholic Encyclopedia online.
That's
it will
exactly
say
right.
That. It will say Lucifer is the planet Venus, and then it refers to also Peter in the book of Revelation.
That's right.
It finally applies to Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah, and the Catholic Encyclopedia, because there are two places. The first one, as I said, is in Revelation, and the other one is in 2 Peter in the New Testament, where Peter says it talks about the bright morning star when he is coming, the Messiah, the bright morning star. Well, look up the word bright morning star in the Bible dictionaries, Bible encyclopedias. Go to any good reference work or any good what am I trying to say? Seminarian library. Go to any good seminary library and get the encyclopedias and dictionaries of Christian religion and look up the word Lucifer, and it will tell you Lucifer is Jesus. He is the bright morning star, and the very word Lucifer means bright morning star.
Bright morning star means Venus. When you observe the orbit of Venus over a number of years, it describes a pentagram in the sky.
That's right, exactly.
And they've been told in other faiths that Lucifer is Jesus' brother. But then again, if Jesus is the Son, we're not talking about a man. We're talking about the literal sun.
Yeah, S-U-N.
S-U-N. Mm-hmm. And Lucifer is actually the planet Venus, and Set is
the prince of darkness in Egypt, the prince of darkness. And of course, you know, when you get into Christianity, we're talking about the war between light and darkness, between the sun and between the darkness at night. So it's, you know, the darkness has 12 hours to rule the world, and the sun has 12 hours to rule the world. So it's an equal battle, back and forth, back and forth. And this is why we're told that Jesus will return. And he will return. When he left the world in the hands of the prince of darkness. Well, of course, when the sun goes down, the prince of darkness in Egypt was called Set. That's why it gets dark at sunset. So the prince of darkness rules the world for 12 hours until God's Son, the light of the world, comes back and saves us.
Yeah, but when you say God's Son, you're actually saying that
S-U-N.
S-U-N, but you're saying Jesus himself never existed, correct?
Yeah, I'm saying Jesus never existed, but the entire story of Jesus in the New Testament, the entire story, from Matthew to Revelation, is a profoundly important work on the world scene. I am saying the Bible and the New Testament and the Bible is an incredibly important story. It's got all the most important knowledge and wisdom and understanding woven into the story of the New Testament, but you have to know how to read it, to see it. I mean, that's why it has Jesus himself saying, you have eyes, but do not see. You have ears that do not hear. And with your heart, you do not get the sense of it.
So you're saying that all the priests, the cardinals, the bishops, even the Pope himself
has no idea in the world of the real hidden truth in the New Testament. It's hidden. And that's
so none of them actually studied astrotheology or went through it, or even
none of the Catholic theologians, and I've talked to Jesuit theologians, and privately when I'm talking to them, I sat and talked with them in St. Louis when I was there visiting some friends. So that's a home of Jesuits up there in St. Louis and New Orleans, certain places in America that they're very prominent. And the Jesuit theologians that I talked to said, yeah, we understand the whole entire story of the New Testament is astrotheology. We know that. So,
but then what's the whole idea behind the resurrection and the nuns in the wedding dress to Jesus and the offerings the
reason for the nuns is very simple, because in Hebrew, N-U-N-N, nun is a fish. In the Hebrew language, a nun is a fish. So that's why you have the nuns running around. They're fish. And that's why the nuns are always in charge of the schools, because that's where you find fishes in the schools. And the priest and the leading priest, the Holy Father, he wears a fish head. I mean, the fish's mitre is a fish head.
Is that Dagon?
That's right, Dagon, the fish god.
And Jordan, when you look at a nun's body, you got 10 little piggies, 2 calves, right?
Yeah.
An ass and a fish no one can find.
Yeah, I know. It's an incredible when you get into the occult symbolism, going back into the actual and fact symbolism.
Wait, I have to ask this on the air. You're trying to tell me that the priests, the bishops, and the cardinals know that Jesus is just a metaphor?
Yes. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
So when you say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, and you're going in there for absolution, you're getting it from the Son? The literal sun in the sky?
No, you're getting it from him.
You're getting it from him?
You're getting it from him.
How about changing the body and blood?
Yeah, well, that's all symbolic.
Symbolic of what if the man never existed?
Yeah, I know that. It's symbolic of a covenant.
Yeah, you're talking about Bacchus? It's going back to the wine god and Mithrin rites and so forth?
That's exactly right. The Bacchus was the god of wine and revelry. And this is why on the church, on the altar, on Sunday mornings on the altar, you'll see the bread, the wine.
Yes.
It goes back to Bacchus, Bacchus Dionysus, the sun god. He was God's son who died on the cross. He was 12 helpers. His mother was a virgin. It's the same story.
So basically, this was constructed just to take the kesef, the silver, from the man's pocket. This whole thing was just, you're saying, it's just a made-up story.
Yeah.
Also, too, though, Michelangelo didn't have access to the Bible. That was illegal for them to have a copy of that, and that was on TV. They were talking about that. His relation to the Pope. I mean, that Bible, that was for the priest only. That's a symbolic language. When you look at symbolism on one level is saying one thing but meaning another.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, the common man was never supposed to have access to this stuff.
I had a friend that was over in Ventura, California, and he was telling me he's a Catholic, and he said I was at church, and the priest said that the sermon that morning was going to be on the story of Jesus as a metaphor, and he went into the whole, and he said from the pulpit the priest is talking about Jesus was a metaphor. He represented the sun. And the 12 apostles were the 12 signs of the zodiac.
You have people nailing themselves to a cross in the Philippines.
I know.
And you have, people walking on their knees for miles for the resurrection of Christ.
And have no idea in the world what Christ means. The very word Christ.
So there isn't a priest out here who could actually debate this? Is there any theologian of what we're talking about that could actually come forth and debate this? Because we'd like to hear from you.
Well, actually, let me stop you and say I don't intend to debate anybody, but I would challenge.
Better yet, challenge. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's a better one. Challenge you to prove what you are saying about Jesus. Prove it, and you will find they can't prove it.
Can you hear that? You have to be able to prove it. Prove that the story of Jesus actually existed, was true.
It's literally and factually true.
Yeah, because the Bible is referred to as the greatest story ever told, and it is. I have the highest admiration for the New Testament story of Jesus. It is the greatest story ever told. Of that, there is no doubt in my mind. But it is not talking about a literal man. It is a story. The Bible is called the greatest story ever told, not the greatest collection of historical facts.
Has there ever been any astrotheologians that have ever debated this? Has the church ever come forth from what you know?
Oh, no. The church will not discuss this in public ever. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it.
It's just the way,
but if you
you're saying it. It seems impossible. You have billions of people throughout the world.
Yeah.
Believing in Jesus, that this man actually, a kinsman redeemer, came down to this earth and existed. And you're telling me, no.
No, there was no Jesus. And I'll tell you what else. Not only was there no Jesus, the whole story of Jesus in the New Testament is a very important story. I'm not taking away from the story. I'm saying it is a very important story. But it's not based on someone who actually lived. There was, in fact, no man named Jesus. And if you go, and even the church theologians I've talked to admit, well, there's no way we can prove he existed. It's a faith. That's what we call it. We have faith in Jesus. We have faith in it. Well, yeah, but if you're going into court, in a federal court, and your life is on the line, you don't want to go in there and plead your case on the basis of faith. Well, I just know this is true. No. You better bring in facts. You better be able to prove it to a
So the Sanhedrin who put him to death, who came forth, I think it was the Sanhedrin, correct?
Yeah.
Who put him to death?
Yeah, but that is it's a metaphor. I mean, the whole idea that Jesus was put to death, first of all, it's a metaphor. But when it says that the Pharisees judged him at night, they held a night court, so to speak,
right?
And they brought him in before the Pharisees at night to hear him and to judge him. That's a metaphor. That never happened, but it's a symbolic metaphor. And what it's telling you, what that story is telling you, is that Jesus said, I am the truth and the light. Okay? No man comes to the Father unless he comes through me. That is a metaphor, which means if you're going to talk about God, if you really are going to legitimately try and communicate with the divine presence in the universe that men call God, then you better go there without your silly-ass religion. You just forget your silly religion and all your ideas and theology. You better go before God with spirit, and the right spirit and truth. If you don't have the truth, then you better shut up because you're talking to God. And God knows, and that's why we even say, God knows that this stuff you're pushing in the churches is not truth. It's a belief system. So if you're going to go before God, you better go with the right spirit and with the truth. And if you don't have the truth, you better stay out of the presence of God.
Well, when you go into a church, a Catholic church, the first thing you visually see is the crucifix, a man dying on the cross, and the 12 stations of the cross.
Yeah.
How he died, the 12 stations. 12 seems to be a very important number.
Again, 12 stations, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 months of the year, God's Son. Jesus is referred to as God's Son, the light of the world. Well, of course the sun is the light of the world. What the hell else lights the world if it isn't the sun?
And the 12 labors of Hercules.
The 12 labors of Hercules, the 12 stations of the cross. It's the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes of Israel, the
so you're
12
trying to tell
apostles.
me that
all of this is the 12 based on the 12 signs of the zodiac and the God's Son, the master of the 12, and that makes it 13. 13's an unlucky number.
So everybody's just biting on the story and just making money any which way they can on a man that never existed.
On a man that never existed.
Never existed.
Making billions a year on a man that never existed. No such man ever existed.
See, I think what it is these are like people watching a movie projected onto a screen, and they're actually going up and kissing the screen. They're seeing the play before them, and they're not real. That's just light projected on a cloth. But they want to go up to the screen and actually kiss the damn thing.
Yeah.
You're saying that the Jesuits themselves would admit to this story?
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt in my mind. They know exactly, because I've talked to too many Jesuits, and they say, yeah, we understand. It's a metaphor. And I said, did you understand the whole astrotheology metaphor? Absolutely. Yeah, we know that. And I said, well, why are you allowing people to believe that there really was a man named Jesus? And he said, look, it's a religion. It's a conceptual idea. And you have to give the people something to believe in. So we take the story of the old astrotheology story that you're talking about, and they put it into human terms. So when the sun dies on the cross is the north, east, west, and south, which is news, NEWS, north, east, west, and south. Right. Which is on the four corners of the zodiac: spring, summer, autumn, winter. So it's the 4 points on the compass, and the sun dies on the cross because it's a southern cross. When it crosses into the southern sky, the sun stops on its lowest point on December 22nd and down south, and so there's a configuration of stars, a constellation in the southern hemisphere called the Southern Cross, and the sun is on the Southern Cross when it stops and doesn't go any further. On December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, the sun stops and does not go any further. And where it stops right on what we call the Southern Cross. So therefore, the sun is dead for 3 days on the cross. Yeah, it's the Southern Cross in the constellation of the Southern Cross in Brazil, in South America. And so then that's for 3 days, the sun stays on that same cross, December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. But on the 25th, it moves 1 degree northward, 1 degree. The U.S. Navy has instruments that can tell you it just moved 1 degree northward, which means it's going to begin its annual journey back to the northern hemisphere.
So they say the sun.
So we say God's Son is born again.
Born again.
It's starting to move
Let me ask you a question. How about all the martyrs? How do you get away with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and all the other apostles who supposedly died? They have all the shields up. One was burned to death, another one with arrows, another one fed to the lions, and so forth. Is that just stories? Did that actually happen?
Well, Polycarp, one of the very first Christians in the first century, but Polycarp said the entire story was an astrotheological story of the age of Pisces, the 2 fish. And this is why Jesus feeds the masses with 2 fish. The 2 fish are the Piscean symbol for Pisces. And then in Luke
He came in the year of Pisces, supposedly, too, right? That's why they used the symbol of the fish.
That's exactly right. And the Pope wears the fish head. And, that's what... Yeah, that's why we say Christianity is a little fishy. The whole thing is because it deals with Pisces, the age of Pisces.
And the Pope is the grandest official of them all.
Oh, fish. Oh, yeah. And,
okay. Official. Okay.
I'm just, but I think it's funny when you begin to see how
this is the official version of the story.
The whole thing is fishy. And the word none, as I said, none is a word for a fish.
But aren't these words also involved in astrology? Like you said, you have a cardinal point.
That's right.
A lot and none. And I've heard that almost all the words used in the church actually come from astrology.
Oh, absolutely. It all comes from astrology. As a matter of fact, the very word church, you know how many people go to church and have no idea where the word church comes from?
Where does it come from?
The word church in English comes from a Scottish word in Scotland. The Brits got it from the Scots. And in Scotland, if you're a Christian, you get up on Sunday morning, you're going to Kirk, K-E-R-K, or K-I-R-K, Kirk of the Valley, Kirk of the Valley, the little church in the valley. Kirk, K-I-R-K, is a church in Scotland. That's why you have in Star Trek Captain Kirk going on the ship Enterprise, because that's what the church is. It's a business. It's an enterprise, taking mankind where he's never been before. That's true. They've been taking mankind for years. For about 2,000 years they've been taking them where they've never been before.
Yeah, they're
still taking you. They're taking your money and taking everything you own. Yeah.
And why are churches called?
And so, therefore, Kirk, it becomes church in English. But Kirk in Scotland goes all the way back to the Knights Templars during the Crusades, when the Vatican sent the military into the Middle East to take the Jerusalem back. There was a war going on there. They call it the Crusades. Well, in the Middle East, there was a goddess named Circe, or Circe, C-E-R-E-S, C-E-R-E-S, Circe or Circe, and she was referred to as a goddess, Mother Circe. And so the Crusaders, the Knights Templars, the Masonic Order of Knights Templars, who were there at the order of the Pope to fight to take back Jerusalem, they learned a lot from the Islamic people. They learned a lot from their enemies about their religion, about the religion of the Middle East. And so it became very important to the Knights Templars, this whole religion of Circe. And so they brought that back. And when they came back into England and came back to Europe, they ended up, the Knights Templars ended up in Scotland. And so they brought with them all that stuff that they had learned from the Assassins and from the Islamic peoples and all these religions and cults.
And another thing, too, about that, Jordan, the stars' names are in Arabic.
Yes, that's right. They are in Arabic.
Well, what do you mean the stars' names are in Arabic?
The stars have Arabic names. Like this gets into that star Merik, what gets into the real name of America.
Merik is a star system, is a star called Merik, from which we get America. That's where America comes from, is from Merik, the star. But anyway, let me go on with this. So when the Knights Templars came back into Scotland, they brought with them the worship of the goddess Circe. And so Circe becomes Mother Circe, or Mother Kirk, or Mother Church. So Mother Church is Mother Kirk, Mother Circe. Now, what's important about that is that Mother Circe, in the ancient Greek world, the ancient Greek religion, Mother Circe was a goddess who was able to hypnotize people and take their minds from them, hypnotize them, and under a trance bring them into her home. This is the Greek mythology, Mother Circe. And bring the people into her home after she took their minds and manipulated them through magic. Then she would close the door behind them and turn them into animals and feed off of them, eat them and feed off of them. And they would feed her. And so that's exactly what the church has done. The church manipulates people's minds and puts them into a trance, and it's a holy of holies, and you're going before the holies with all the candles and the Lord's presence and all of that. And people get sucked into this, and they go into the church, Kirk, Circe, and Mother Church then closes the door behind them and takes away their brains, so they can't think, they don't read, they don't understand, they couldn't find their way out of a paper bag, they don't understand anything about theology, religion, God, they can't even read. And so all they know is they're drinking their beer and watching TV and go to church on Sunday, and that's all they know. They don't know.
You forgot about football.
Yeah, I know. And so therefore, this is why churches are divided into denominations, like 50s and 100s.
Denominations.
Yeah. It's all money. It's all.
But my point is, with this information, it makes sense. But with this information that you're coming forth with, that there was no Christ, that there was no Jesus.
No.
Okay.
No Jesus.
Okay.
So therefore, incidentally, don't look for Jesus to be coming back, because he was never here to start with. It's very difficult to make a big comeback when you've never been any place to start with. So Jesus is not going to make a big comeback because he was never here to begin with.
So, by you
It's just
bringing
a
forth
story.
this knowledge, where did astrotheology actually come from?
Oh, it came a long time ago. Zachariah Sitchin and I talked about this for many hours. The ancient peoples in Sumeria called them the men of Yore, Y-O-R-E, the men of Yore. The men, they said, there were ancient gods who came here thousands of years ago and told the humans, the indigenous humans that are here, about the 12 signs of the zodiac and about the astrotheological religions of the ancient peoples who came here. So what we're saying is that astrotheology is the teaching from the heavens, who came here a long time ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, and told the prophets and the kings all about this story. And so they took the story and put their own slant on it, and today we call it Christianity. No, it's not. The story of Christianity is a metaphor. It's a symbolic
but by
story.
you saying that, then what actually is going on today is everyone is being conned.
Yeah, they are. Exactly. They're totally being conned, and they have no idea in the world about it. And most people, I think, realize they're being conned, but like the Germans on the out of Hitler,
I don't believe that most people, I think, would die for their savior as opposed to want to believe in the astrotheology. The form
in other
of
words,
truth.
they would rather have the truth. I mean, they would rather have a lie than the truth. Well, that's exactly what the Scripture said. Jesus said, I am the light of the world, and the slave is no greater than the master. What they've done to me, they will do to you. So if you're trying to get to the light of truth with the truth and the light, this is why you have 12 jurors in a jury system. The 12 jurors are the 12 apostles.
So when they're looking for his remains or his family remains or Mary or
that's just good for Hollywood. That's Hollywood. That's good for business. Keep people agitated to go find the lost Ark of the Covenant. And there was no lost Ark of the Covenant.
You said that went back to Egypt, right? The Ark of the Covenant actually was
it has nothing to do with being Jewish at all, period. Zero. Nothing to do with being Jewish at all. Jews took that from the Egyptians. The Ark of the Covenant in the Hebrew religion is a story. It has no basis, in fact, at all. It's based on the Ark of the Contract. It's called the Ark of the Contract. Go to the university library and sit down and read about Ark of the Contract. And it was an ark that was a box that had two handles, that had two poles, and the priests would carry it around, and it had two angels or seraphim on the top. This was all Egyptian, and it was all Egyptian, and the ark, it had sacred objects inside the ark, but it was totally Egyptian. Period. Had nothing to do with Hebrews.
So they just twisted the story to their...
twisted the story and took it just like the Christians took this whole idea of Jesus dying on the cross. They took that from the Hindus. Because in the Hindu, God dies on the cross. Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. I mean, we could go on for hours about this. Where does this, the Abraham and Isaac and Jacob?
Are you saying they didn't exist either?
Look at one of the leading rabbis in America told me many years ago, back in the mid-'60s. I asked him about. I said, Rabbi, was there in actual fact Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and King David and King Solomon and all these biblical? He said none of them ever existed.
But what are they doing in Israel where they're up at the wall, the Solomon's wall, where they're all...
You're talking about Wall Street?
Yeah, no.
No,
they're all over there. They're all bobbing back and forth, and they've...
Oh yeah. No, let me tell you what that means. When you see the old
they're bobbing.
They're bobbing back and forth.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because
don't say they have to use a restroom.
Huh?
No, why? Why are they bobbing back and forth?
They're bobbing back and forth because they're mimicking sex. The sexual...
Oh, come on now. They're up against... They're mimicking sex up against...
Yeah, sex up against the wall because God and the Hebrew was both male and female. And so the presence of God to a Hebrew, to the Jews, ask them, is a feminine principle. And the feminine principle of their God,
before
Jehovah...
Before they changed it to Jehovah, they had the feminine...
It was a feminine principle.
Okay.
And it was called Shekinah. And so, not Shekinah. Shekinah is a feminine principle of creation. And so the male priests and the male Jews are mimicking the sexual act when they are back and forth, bobbing back and forth. They're having sex with the Shekinah. That's the fact. That's
But
a fact.
Jordan,
of
on
life.
that point, there were no J's until the printing press. J was an I. So this thing called Jew, I mean, it was really I-U.
That's right, I-U.
I-O. The I representing the phallus and the O representing the female.
wait a minute.
That's right. It's
So
the
wait a
I,
minute.
the O.
When I
I-U.
see them bobbing back and forth on the
That's
wall, they're having sex with Shekinah.
Shekinah. Exactly. That's what
So
it
if I
means.
go up to a rabbi and say, "Excuse me, how was Shekinah today?" He's going to know
Yeah,
what
right,
time
yeah.
it is.
You get a little something today?
Huh?
Yeah.
Did you lose a little bit in the pants there? I mean, what's happening? I said, notice you got a couple of glaze stains here.
You painted
Yeah.
I saw you painted the wall today.
Oh my God!
Yeah, that's what it is. The back and forth, the back and forth motion is the sexual act.
Now, do they actually know this? I mean, it's just like
Oh no.
Or is
The rabbis all know this. They all know that that's what it means. They are mimicking having sex with God. They are sexually encountering.
well, I can
the
believe it because the nuns are married to God.
Well, of
That's
course.
why they have their wedding.
Of course.
So Shekinah might be. I mean, why not? You
Well, that's
know?
what I said.
So if you have a nun and a Shekinah there, I mean, he's getting. I mean, they get a little bit of both.
Yeah, like
She ain't getting none, and he's getting something from none that ain't there. So
That's right.
The nun's not getting none, she's getting some.
yeah.
It's an incredible story of sexual symbolism in Judaism, Christianity.
Let's get into
Islam.
Yahweh. Yahweh is what now? You told me Yahweh is the
Yeah,
combustion of
Yahweh is a huge story about Yahweh. Yahweh goes all the way back to sun god, and then it's connected to the worship of the moon, and then at one time it's connected to the worship of the planet Saturn. But Yahweh, the spelling of the Hebrew God with the 4 Hebrew letters is called tetragrammaton.
That's a grammaton.
Okay, but actually it's tetragrammaton, A-T-O-N. The Aton was the Egyptian god of the sun. So the 4 symbols in the Hebrew for is called tetragram Aton, because the Aton on tetragrammaton is the sun god of Egypt. This is why Indiana Jones, when he's going to look for the lost Ark of the Covenant of the Hebrews, where does he actually find the lost Ark of the Covenant? Where does he actually, in point of fact, find it?
Egypt.
He doesn't find it in the Middle East and in the Holy Land of Jerusalem. There's nothing holy in the Holy Land.
He finds it at Petra.
He found it in that's the Christian. That was the cup of the
Oh yeah,
Grail.
the chalice. Yeah, he finds
But
it.
the Holy Ark was found in Egypt. In Egypt was the Holy Ark. Why? Because Steven Spielberg is a lot of things, but stupid is not one of them. And he knows that the entire story of the Holy Ark of the Covenant is an Egyptian story. And so if you're going to find the Holy Ark, you better go to where it is. It's in Egypt. Has nothing to do with Hebrews whatsoever. There was no Hebrew Ark. There was an Egyptian Ark called the Ark of the Contract. Well, a contract in Hebrew is a covenant, so we call it the Ark of the Covenant.
So the Christians took the spin-off of the Ark of the Covenant, or the Egyptian from the Jews, and the Christians turned it to they twisted their story on it. And
yeah, of course, and of course, well, the Jews are twisting their stories. They twist it all around. Take something from Egypt. Take a lot of stuff in the Hebrew religion comes from India, comes from the Hindus. The very idea of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham is the one man that all 3 religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all revere the presence of Abraham. He was the father of all of it. There was no Abraham. Abraham never existed. Therefore,
so the whole book itself,
the whole thing is
the whole thing that you're saying is just a great comic book. I mean, there's lessons to be learned from it, but it's like it's just a bunch of stories.
It's the greatest story ever told.
So it was not written by the hand of God.
No.
Or interpreted from.
No. It was written by men. And we know who wrote. We actually know who actually, in fact, wrote the book of Revelation. It wasn't Apostle John, because there was no Apostle John.
Well, who wrote it then?
Oh, that's a whole other story of actually who, in fact, actually wrote the book of Revelation. It wasn't John. We know that for sure, because there was no Apostle John. There was no John, the writer of a Revelation. There was no man.
Well, Jordan, the Old Testament, you're the writer of that. You're getting into Solomon bar Isaac, alias Rashid.
That's it. Solomon bar Isaac.
Yeah, but when we say that, we're not going back 2,000 years, are we? Or 3,000 years?
No, we're going to the time of the Crusades, when this whole story actually, factually, in point of fact, began. And it also gets into Eleanor of Aquitaine, which gets into maritime admiralty law and the Hanseatic League.
That's right. Hanseatic League, the Germans, the Holy Roman Empire.
So wait a minute. The Old Testament itself is not over 3,000 years old?
No, not at all. No, the Old Testament itself.
We got to prove that too.
The Old Testament is not as an AD. The whole idea of ancient Israel never existed. There was no such a thing as ancient Israel. It never existed.
So there's no Garden of Eden?
No. Well, I don't know about that. That's different. That could have been on Atlantis. But there was no ancient Israel.
Well, where do we get into the story now of Adam and Eve, the book of Genesis?
Oh, I know. It's incredible.
You call it what? Not Genesis. You call it what? Gen what?
Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis.
Well, that's what it came from. Genesis. Genesis. From Isis, the goddess in Egypt. Genesis. From which we get Genesis. I mean, there's so much that needs to be known about religion and theology, which is very simple. All you got to do is go to a library and read the book, read the reference book, encyclopedia, and read the Catholic encyclopedia. Go to the Jewish encyclopedia in the universities. Hebrew University has the Encyclopedia Judaica, the Jewish encyclopedia. Go read it. And read what the Catholic Encyclopedia says, and read what all the American Encyclopedia Britannica, Americana. Go read the reference books, and we'll tell you where all of these religions came from. There was no ancient Jerusalem. There was no ancient Israel. There was an ancient Jerusalem, but there was no ancient Israel and the holy people of the prophets and all that. None of it ever existed. And there are two guys in Israel today, and I've said this on other programs, two guys in Israel today that are referred to as both of them are highly respected. One is an archaeologist, and I can't remember the other one, but they were both highly respected in their fields, and they wrote a book called Unearthing the Bible. And in which the book, this is written by two Zionist Jews in Israel.
I believe one's a professor of archaeology named Finkelstein, something like that.
And they wrote a book called Unearthing the Bible, in which they say basically all of the stories in the Old Testament are just that, those stories. There was no Moses, there was no Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King Solomon, King David, none of that's all stories. There's no proof that any of that, especially King Solomon. They picked that one, but there was no King Solomon, never existed. They said Solomon was just a figment, it was a metaphor. Sol, Om, On. Solomon is S-O-L, Latin for the sun. Om, O-M, Hindu for the principle of creation.
So
and
basically,
On
you're saying it's just a big show. It's just a big charade when the Pope is up there and he's reading from the Gospel of St. John, and he's up there and he's Dagon, fish head on, and
that's all
dressed in his Kabbalistic war.
Fish head on. It's all corporations. It's all big money. It's all a show. It's all Hollywood.
But you realize that if people were to believe in what you're saying, it would revolutionize everything. Everything would just be upside down. It would flip.
Well, I would think the people of the world would be welcoming that. It's about time we flip this crap that's going on, all the lies and deception and banking.
I don't know, Joe. I mean, the Pope, Rome, up there waving around, not much different than Elton John being the pinball wizard in concert with the big shoes and,
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's just sex, drugs, and rock and roll at a different tempo.
That's it. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's all it is. The priests wear long robes. And why long robes? Because that's a woman's dress, and they are male inside. That's why the priest represents the Shekinah and the Christian tradition, because he's representing the sexual impulse inside the female wearing the dress. And so he's the male inside the female. And so he's wearing a dress.
So he's not doing anything wrong with all these scandals.
No, that's right. Nothing at all. Come on, Paulie.
God of love. The God of love.
That's right. And incidentally, the people will tell you, all Christians will tell you, well, God is love. No, it's not love.
Love is all you need.
No. God is Jove. 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 Going back to Jupiter. Jupiter was Dios. Jupiter in Latin is Dios, which is God. In Latin, in Spanish, God is Dios. Dios is Job. This is why, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter.
Thursday.
Well, Jordan, on that word Jupiter, once again, in the ancient world, the J did not exist.
That's right. It was Iopiter.
So it was I-O-Peter. So I-O, which would relate to Jew, I-O, male inside the female, Petar, the phallus. I-O-Petar.
That's right. And that's what that's where we get the word Palestine, the very word Palestine. We talk about the Palestinians, Pala. it goes back to Phala, the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was a big cock. He was a big male in town. He's the big boss of all bosses.
Well, Jordan, on that point, you take the word colonel. There's an R in the word colonel. Yet when you look at how that word spell, I mean, it's pronounced with an R, but when you look at it, there's no L in the word colonel. I mean, there's no R in the word colonel, yet it's pronounced with an R, which tells you R's and L's are interchangeable. So Pharaoh will become Phallo or Phallus.
That's right. So Phala, Stein. Stein in Hebrew is a stone, a rock. Phala goes back to Phala, which is a phallic stone, which is so Palestine means a male erection hard as a rock.
Cock is hard as a rock.
That's right. It's hard as a rock. Palestine.
So when you see the Pharaoh coming, you're about to get the royal shaft. Right where it counts, right where the sun doesn't shine.
All of this is sex, drugs, rock and roll, words, terms, symbols, emblems, but it all basically has to do with the reproduction of life, because that is the bottom line. Only God can create life. Well, that's what the male phallic does. That's what males and females do. They create life. And so this whole idea of religion is sex, drugs, rock and roll, and to add the brilliance of the wisdom to it, astrotheology, the rule of the heavens, the sun, the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 followers of the great sun. That's why you have 12 jurors in a courtroom, because they help bring the truth to light from the light of truth.
Well, Jordan, take that word God, then reverse that word. That becomes dog, as in dogma. We all know dogma has something to do with God.
Yeah.
Now you have a word called dog, God backwards. Well, G's and K's are interchangeable because you have the word gnosis, which starts with a G,
That's right.
equals knowledge. So take dog backwards, put a K on it, you get doc. And then in the ancient world, vowels were of no consequence. So doc can very easily, you can change an O to an I. What's doc become? It becomes dick.
That's right. I mean, this is why Solomon, Peter, I remember reading the reference works at the seminary libraries. Peter was called Simon Peter. And it goes back to the phallus, the Peter. That's what we even say today, guys with this Peter.
So why are they prostrating themselves on the altar when they're giving their life to God? When they become a priest.
Well, that's what they did in the Hindu, and that's what they do in many of the old ancient mystery schools. They lay down and prostrate themselves before their God.
So you're saying it's their son?
Oh, yeah, so the sun. That's what we do.
So you're saying it's basically sun worship,
well, of course it is. Well, I mean, when you go out to the beach, what do? You lay out there on the pad, you lay out there in the sun. You're laying out and worshiping the sun.
Now, you actually feel that they know that Jesus is just a metaphor,
Yes,
the priests?
I am totally convinced of that.
The priests actually know that?
The priests absolutely know that, because I've talked to way too many of them, and each one of them that I have talked to, they figure, you know, so I might as well tell you, because you already know anyway. Yeah, you're right, so what? And I mean, what do you mean, so what? Why don't you tell the people the real truth and really do something spiritual for the people and teach them, something about the Spirit? And I said, no, we can't do that. This is a business. So if we go out and tell the people the truth, they don't want to hear the truth.
Give us Barabbas.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why there's a story in the Bible where Pontius Pilate brings Jesus and Barabbas, a prisoner, out, and he says to the whole town, I am, according to your custom, I can release a prisoner to you, one prisoner each year. So today I have two prisoners. I have Jesus, I have Barabbas, who everybody knows is a thief and a crook and a liar, and we have Jesus, who is the truth and the light. Which one am I to give you? And it says in the Bible, the whole town with one voice said, give us Barabbas. That's a metaphor. It's a symbolic story telling you that when the powers that be, Pontius Pilate, the governor, he says to the world, he says to the country, I could give you one of two things. I could give you the truth and the light, or I could give you Barabbas, a murdering, lying pimp, criminal. Which one do you want? Always, the people will always say, give us Barabbas. In other words, give us the lies and the bullshit and all the crap and all the stories. We don't want the truth and the light. That's the fact. That's the real truth. Like the movie says, son, who was it?
You can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
And also, too, Jordan, the truth might just be, look, I'm the Pope, and I'm tired of you morons. I'm going to sleep. Bye.
That's it. I'm the
Yeah,
boss
that's the
of all
truth.
bosses. This we could talk about religion for hours. There's so much people don't know. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for being with us. We're running a little over time, but as you can see, there's so much to religion that we haven't been told, that the people haven't been told. So I want to welcome you to come back again, because we want to talk about this subject more. It's about somebody. It's about time somebody throws some light on the darkness of what's going on in churches and religion. I'm Jordan Maxwell.